My working relationship with Total Tools is excellent. I deal predominantly with the franchise area of Total Tools, CFO as well, and it's been really strong over a 3.5 year period, and Total Tools has grown dramatically over that period, so it's been a really good ride. I assist with franchise funding and predominantly with the bank and the client. That relationship I can take a lot of the stress out of that relationship with the client instead of them getting worried about the timelines and all the information being provided. That's our role. We actually take that stress out of the client's hands and deal with the bank on their behalf. Belgravia Finance is predominantly equipment financier who also do commercial loans. We look after franchise funding, but predominantly our team at Belgravia is all ex-bankers, all involved in equipment finance. Well, for franchisees, the system's quite strong. So there's two particular banks that we deal with, Westpac and CBA, and they're very keen to keep growing their exposure with Total Tools, which is a really good indication that they like the system and they really want to entertain a lot more exposure. So. Well asset-backed individual who's had a lot of experience in business, not necessarily in the franchise systems, but it definitely helps. They've been in retail or they've been in the building industry and they've got reasonable people skills. But the most important thing is to make sure they've got enough asset backing to make sure they can get the finance. It's more about the requirement of gaining the finance at this scale, I think, because it's not a cheap exercise to come into a system like this. But the vetting process with Total Tools is very strong. So by the time the franchisee gets to me, they've been vetted thoroughly, and they've been given that information up front before they get to the vetting process. Well, it's not Total Tools more so, it's about what we have to deal with the banks and the parameters we have to work around. And sometimes they are a bit of a moving target. However, we do have quarterly meetings with both of the banks that I've mentioned, where our relationship is quite strong. So we can ask those questions directly to them if there's anything changing or we see anything that's changing from our point of view. But we've just got to ride that wave and we've got to deal with the banks. And the major frustration, I think, is dealing with bank time. And that's when the deal or the transaction leaves my hands or the franchisee's hands and goes to the bank. We've got to deal with the banks and be patient with them, even though they give us deadlines they don't hit. We have to be quite patient with that. The background work that gets done for the franchise system, the way that Total Tools go about, the way they look for sites, the demographics, the people they're looking for, it's a really strong system and it ticks all the boxes. And that's why it's not easy for me to go and get funding, but it definitely makes it a lot easier to create a strong relationship with the banks when you've got such a strong system. I would be trying your hardest to get into the Total Tools system. It's a really strong system. It's a great company sitting behind it. The board's very strong. The growth has been really strong over the last 3 years. I think it's a really good market for the way that population growth is going in Australia. There's going to be a lot more building going on. There's going to be a lot more tradies needing tools, and the reputation of Total Tools has grown rapidly. The brand has grown rapidly across Australia in the last 3 years. Existing store gets put on the market. I'd suggest the price for that is going to be higher than just the start-up cost of a greenfield store. If an existing franchisee wants to buy that store, I would say that the systems that are in place with the banks will make it easier for those people to buy that store because they can actually leverage off their existing cash flow of their existing stores. If it's a new person into the franchise system who's not a Total Tools franchisee, obviously the risk for them is going to be higher because I would suggest the price is going to be higher. So they would still need to come to the party with the 50% equity, but that number is going to be bigger. But as far as the risk from the bank's point of view, I would say they'd be more comfortable looking at a mature store. As long as the price isn't too high, they'll do their own calculation on what they think and then they'll come back with the requirement. The greenfield side is assessed quite hard. However, there's not a lot of flexibility on the mix of equity. It's pretty much straightforward. Existing stores are different because they're stock to take into account cash flows on both sides of the ledger. Since the Royal Commission, it's been a different landscape. Before the Royal Commission, it was all straightforward and there was no real changed the goalposts in what the requirements were and what the levy or what the offering was going to be from the bank. Since the Royal Commission, franchising got scrutinised. However, I believe everything outside of hospitality will start to ease up a little bit sooner or later, because I think it was hospitality that was concentrated on, not the retail of tools. So I believe that Total Tools brand within the banks which I previously mentioned is very strong. So I believe that they've got to abide by what their policies are within the banks, but I think they'll relax on some retail franchise systems pretty soon, because they need to start to grow again.